This is Patrick. This is the second in a new series of webinars where we drill down into a particular aspect or feature set of ArcSite and show you how you can best use it for your workflow, for your work. I have with me my cohort, Andrew. He's here along so we can have someone who can answer questions in the moment or pose them to the group. So feel free to reach out to Andrew. This is a kind of a mixed audience where we have newer and longer term clients. So we might cover something you already know, but our goal is to make it so that there's some value in this overall discussion. And this really can be a discussion. Won't be a great large audience. So our hope is that if our subject prompts questions, we're happy to make this more of a discussion than a talk. And to that, as I mentioned, there is a button in your controls for Zoom where you can ask questions, and we'll have that, and we'll have a actual Q&A section at the end as well. But feel free to ask at any time, and Andrew can, like I said, can work that. Last thing on the prep stuff is that we will be recording this session, and I'll send out a link to where it is available afterwards. So. There we go. So today's agenda is to cover collaboration in ArcSite. That can and actually does cover a lot of ground. And in this current situation we're all in, it can carry some extra significance. Because I think the more we can effectively collaborate remotely, the better. So I'll be talking about the ArcSite features that support collaboration, as well as some of the feedback that we've received on how people are using the tool in these kind of crazy times. Additionally, I'll bring up some new features that have come out since last month's webinar. And this is a great time to have questions answered on any ArcSite topic. That end part, we can go off of collaboration and talk to whatever makes sense. Okay. So there's a whole hour scheduled, but likely we'll probably spend about 30 minutes. The first piece I am going to kind of talk to is how you can share in the tool. There's a lot of options there. Projects and drawings within them can be shared at multiple access levels and a whole bunch there. But before I go into it, I want to kind of talk what that can enable. And that I want to bring up the collaboration from the field to your coworkers in the office, from the field to your manager and back and forth, production, operation, and subs can get some value here. If you interact with a drafting or CAD department or have contractors to do that for you, there's the interaction there. And then last, some vendor stories. I'm going to do some switching between things here. I am now in our user site, and I've brought up this company called Collaboration Company, and you can see we have 3 accounts here, 2 of which are listed as admin. Admins mean that you can see everything that gets uploaded to the cloud from any of the various accounts. I also have one here that's coworker, and the coworker is not, and he would only then see what he has access to because he created it, or he's been granted access specifically to that one. So there can be any number of combinations of these access levels set across the various company accounts. So everybody can see everything, or just somebody or somebody's can have access to all the work, or to where everybody sees all their work by default. It's very easy to set up, and it's just whatever makes sense for your situation. As mentioned just a minute ago, it does require uploading work. So I'm jumping over to my ArcSite, and I want to show that real quick. I have this project here. I can come into a drawing, and this is that upload to cloud that will enable it to be pushed into the cloud. So I can do an individual, or I can come to it as a project level and select the select thing here, add a couple of these guys that I want to upload. And then in the left top corner, do that. And in this case, actually several of these don't need to be uploaded. They're already up to date. will determine that and upload the ones you want. Excuse me. And if you're exporting a takeoff or a estimate, the process of doing so already uploads that stuff to the cloud. I will take a second here to recommend uploading your work regardless of whether you're sharing or not. Uploaded work also provides you a backup. So if something were to happen to your device, you can simply download the work onto a new or secondary device. I mention that because currently there's no upload automatically. So I'll get back off my high horse and go back to collaboration. If you have a coworker who's not set at an admin level, you can share that project explicitly with them. I come back into my app here. I have a share for each project. And in here, I can do a number of things. I can invite people that aren't part of my company by adding their emails. Or if I'm in a company, I can just pick the company accounts I want to send them to. And then there's a couple of levels. Admin means you can share to other folks and edit. Coworker means you can just edit the document. And viewer, which is useful for, say, you want to send it to a sub or a crew, they can get that, but they can't change it accidentally or on purpose. So there's a couple of levels there. Excuse me. Now, let's see. The next thing I was going to do is go to my user site here. I'm going to open up an actual drawing. Because once I've uploaded to the cloud, well, actually, at this point, we'll talk about, I mentioned a couple of use cases between field and office and whatnot. So I'll talk some about that. If you have someone in the office who's going to take your output from ArcSite and then go into another work process, once something has been uploaded and they have access, they can come to our user site and they'll get an email saying something's come in, or they can come here and grab it, and they can download either a whole project of information, or they can actually step into an individual drawing and download either a single element or click this. Once that download has started, I'll have a couple of screenshots here to save some time. Once I've done that, that process of downloading is going to occur immediately on my local device. And so you can get the download here. But what's also nice is that you can get an email sent to you. So in this case, I can send this email, forward it to someone else who doesn't have ArcSite or doesn't have access. And with this link, they can just click it and immediately get a download. So it's a nice way to share this work that's been done in the field from the office to someone who's not even part of the team. Excuse me, I'm having some issues here, so I'm going to be drinking some water. So let's talk about the sort of the interaction between user, like field guy and your manager. So from either direction, if you are the field person, you can upload this stuff. The manager can pick this up, and you can have a conversation based on a visual rather than just calling your manager and discussing the thing. On the other side, if you're the manager, you can also sort of insert yourself into the process so that when someone uploads this, you can go in there and look at the work, make changes, and send those back to the field person or send them on to the client. So it's a nice way in either direction to communicate from the field to the manager. One can also talk about the production or sub workflow. I mentioned earlier that you can share something as a view only, but in addition to that, we do, just by drawing your work, your diagrams and your visuals, you can also create what we call a takeoff schedule, or it might be called a bill of materials, material list, whatever the case may be. And those can be generated automatically. So let's say you have your operations manager back at the office. Once you've uploaded the thing, he can go get an email, go download it, and know what he needs to put on the truck. Additionally, maybe not everything is required for the people you're sending this to. So in the app, we have layers, which you can use. And based on what layers you turn on and off, you can send a specialized version to one sub and then turn on other layers and send it to another one. Just a way of communicating right through the app and only providing that level of detail that that particular person needs. In addition to what I was talking about here, if I zoom in, I can also export, in this case, a PDF. I can choose an option here that's called visible portion only. So let's say the crew is going to work on this particular section today. I can come export this out and have them just focus on the piece that they're needing to work on today. I mentioned going to a CAD. So if you do have that sort of interaction, either internally or as a contractor, one of the ways that you can share and collaborate is through our output options. We have two AutoCAD formats, the DXF, DWG. So whether I'm exporting it directly from the app and sending it to someone or uploading it to the cloud, either way, that third party or that next person in the thing can pick it up and not only have the precision you capture on field, but it's an editable version for the software that they use. So they don't have to start from scratch. They can pick it up right there in that process. And that workflow can go back and forth. They can resend something back out to you as a change, and that iterative effect can go on over and over again as much as needed.
Patrick, just real quick to jump in there, one quick question. You mentioned you can obviously send it along as a CAD file. Does that work the other way around, or is it just able to be sent out as a CAD file as opposed to?
Sure, good question. Today in our app, you do need to import it as a PDF. We don't do a direct import of a DWG or DXF at this time. It is in our future plans, but for today, they would have to import it back as a PDF. I mean, you would import it as a PDF, and then you could still do the iterative thing, just not in the native.
Great.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about another workflow is, so people work with their material vendors, and the interaction there is really important. I have a story, pretty short one, but pretty powerful. There was a guy I was working with, and they went out to a site there. It was about 4 hours from their office. He got there, they started digging a trench to put in these high pressure pipes. They just dig up and they find another pipe. They had no idea it was there. So he said before ArcSite, what he would have done is called the vendor, because the tolerances on some of this equipment is very important. He would have called them up and talked to them, or more likely he would have had to leave the site, drive 4 hours to go back to the office and do a CAD more professional looking thing and then send that to him. So with ArcSite, they were just able to draw with that precision, send it directly to the vendor, have that kind of conversation, and as a result, did not close the project for the day. So all of these things I'm talking about, the sharing, you can enable you to sort of reduce the amount of physical interactions you're having with others, but while still maintaining both the speed at which you can produce this stuff and highly valuable output. So it's a given. We didn't need a pandemic to have this. We've always had the ability to take this information and get it immediately to whomever is next, or wherever you want to share it, in whatever format that makes sense for that next person. I'd like to change it up just a little bit now and talk about versioning, because versioning is another really nice feature that we have in the app. Every time I upload a drawing to the cloud, I'm creating another version of that document. And that is accessible either from the app or from the user site. So I'll show the app side first. I can come into a drawing here. Actually, I don't want to come into the drawing. I want to tap on this eye icon here. And there's an icon here that says versions. So when I open this up, I'm going to see all the versions to date. And I can tap on one. And when you're uploading, part of it is you can provide comments. So let's say you're the first in the process. You're going to upload this here, add a comment. Somebody else picks it up. They add their comments. So you can look at that, as well as there's a compare button here. So I'm going to compare these two and tap on this compare button and actually can see what's been changed based on the version. So obviously this makes a lot of sense. If you want to stay in the app and make some changes with your coworkers, you can just put it all together in here and have that conversation even without physically or being at the same time. You can communicate through the app here. So I'm going to jump over to my piece here because I have the same thing here. Here's a different one. I'm looking at version 3. I can come here and look at version 2 and version 1, right? And any of these I can actually then download the version that you're interested in.
Patrick, one quick question about that.
Yeah.
Could you give an example maybe of how you've seen versions used in
Absolutely.
practice?
Thank you. That's a good question. So I was talking to a construction company not too long ago. Decent size, not a huge one, but they have like 10 folks working and potentially using the tool. They're not all currently using, but we were talking about ways that they want to reduce the amount of communication channels that they're using right now. Right now they use the phone, they use the email, paper, whatnot. So they're using the tool for designing these construction sites. They're also using it farther along after construction starts and whatnot. And what they were finding, the problem was that they weren't able to always track these various different intersection points or communication points. And they didn't want to go to having a large tracking task management tool on top of this. They wanted to stay light. So we talked and we're able to figure out ways of just simply using this to communicate the change every time. And whether even in some cases, any change was made, simply other than to communicate and have this running commentary of how things are changing within the drawing. So whether you're accessing it from the app itself or you're here in the office and you're looking at this, you can kind of follow that conversation, see the visual change, and then download or do something with that as needed. You could extrapolate out, and there could be some other ones, simply just being able to put a date on things. So when things are done, they can upload it and say, this has been done. So they can come. So it is sort of just a day-to-day change list of what's occurred on the project. Again, a way to use the tool to manage some of the other sides of things like the tasks so you don't necessarily want to go get a whole other system to manage it. If you have a small enough group, it makes sense that you can do a lighter touch on that stuff and still have the consistency and the conciseness and comprehensiveness of that story as the project moves along. You can use that. In addition, a lot of folks I see use the embedded. Let me go back to my app. I'm in this thing. That's why I can't do anything. Come back to the drawing itself. I've taken photos and embedded them in here. One of the things I see folks doing is using photos that change over time. So you could have, this is day 1, day 2, day 3. And so you can not only have that communication textually, you can have the photos show the change over time. And then when the project's done, all this stuff can be uploaded and put into a different format. But during the time of the project, it just remains in the single tool. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah. I think I think that's a great way, especially when you're not right with the person that you're trying to communicate with. It's a great way to show the progress of the work that's being done on that project over time, for sure.
Sure. And for years now, we've had clients who have a field crew who no longer even have to go into the office. So prior to ArcSite, they would have to go pick up their stuff in the morning and then drive back out to site. So greatly increasing their travel time and less time spent on work. So even long before where the social distancing we're dealing with now, we've had a lot of clients who like us because they can get set up in the office. The guy has his pad at home. He goes directly to work site. He has all that information. At the end of the day, they also don't have to go back to the office for a number of reasons. One, they can send it off, and the quality of the work that's done in it is such that it doesn't need to be redone again in a different system like a CAD or something. It's not a piece of paper that's not scaled, not precise. The output is good enough that there is no redo on work. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of other ways of looking at what we consider collaboration. What we do in our tool also is allow you to create content for your company. So you have the experts either in the office, the manager, whoever the case that may be, who have that built-in knowledge, and they want to share it with everybody. So we have a couple of ways of doing that. We call a shared shape library. So everyone has probably seen the shape thing on the left that you can access. What we can do is set up for multiple user account or a company account, set it up so that you have a series of shapes that are named after your company and broken down by groupings. So the folks in the field will only use these items. It's the easiest way to do it anyway. They don't even have to be asked to do it. You're just providing them a set that makes it easy for them to use, and then it makes all the plans come out consistently because of the same symbology is being used. So this is a very simple thing we do. And that can be carried over to something we call now products. So a product can be like this funnel here, looks like a shape, but it doesn't act like a shape. It not only has a visual, but you can collect additional information on that. That can be stuff if you're doing an audit. So you collect the visual on a PDF plan, and then you enter in additional information about it. Or it could be for costing purposes for an estimate. So when I drop something on, I'm automatically building up my proposal list. Again, what happens here is one person or multiple people set up the environment, then the folks in the field just use it. All I have to do now is continue to draw my drawing, drop in some shapes, draw some lines, and based on that, I'm getting my proposal and my takeoff. So that's products. We also have things like shared forms. So often I see there's like a common form that you'll have to fill out about the client, and or in some fields they have high turnover, and training can be built into these sort of a checklist of things that they always have to do when they get to the site. Your mileage may vary, but there's certainly a lot of different ways you can collect information in a form. And this form isn't separated from the product, the project. It lives alongside of it. So when I go back to the office workflow, the folks in the office can download that along with the diagram and the material list. It's just another deliverable from it. But again, one person creates it, everybody uses it. Excuse me. I'm gonna jump back over here to my app, come out. One of the really interesting things that we're seeing these days is the concept of a virtual appointment or a virtual visit or whatever you want to call it. It's taken multiple forms depending on the vertical and the product line and whatnot and what you're doing. But there are some commonalities we're seeing, and I just want to talk about one of them. And actually, I'm going to put this out there for anyone who's doing these things. I'd love to hear back, because we want to help enable this flow even more. But what I'm hearing, a common workflow is you get a lead, you get a new project, however you get information about your new client, you call them up. If it's a homeowner, you have to gauge their technological savviness. But in a lot of cases, you'll go ahead and set something up, do a video call, that initial call where you're talking about your product line and the values your company brings, have that conversation, and then you walk them into, in this case, I have this broken down into 2 drawings, but this case, so this is a gutter example. You have the people actually walk around their house and just take photos. So they've gone around the entire building, taking these photos. they could be really savvy and add it to an ArcSite drawing. That's not the intention here. In most cases, it's just send those to me in an email. So once we've done that, you can take this and put it in the tool. And once you've scaled it, right, I can come and generate a drawing based on real life. I've sort of incorporated all those various drawings here, right? I've scaled it and then put it all in here. In this case, I'm putting products in. I mentioned products. So when I'm drawing these lines, I'm actually indicating gutter length in these and some other stuff here. Generate this, send this back over, initiate a second, in this case, hopefully a video conference with somebody there. Then you have your discussion around again, what the project is, visual here. And because we are a visual tool, it really does help in that kind of conversation, especially when you have this distance. So you can have them looking at it and indicate and so they can get a good feel of what it is rather than just an estimate. But as soon as you do that, then it goes into either a digital sign format, or if you're going to email it to them. In our case, you can send an estimate right here or from here, and then you close. And there's not a lot of steps here, but what's so powerful is that people are actually using this, and depending on the product line, and again, on the client, you can do these sales, sell your project without ever visiting the site. Well, that's not going to work for everything. There's some things you got to be on site. And I have heard from some folks that they'll do this initial part, set things up, and then figure out a time that they can come by where they don't have to physically interact with the person at the site and do some site measurement afterwards, and then kind of roll back that into this sort of process of talking to them without ever seeing them. So,
Patrick, how would you see a process like this working, outside of the COVID situation? Is that kind of, once they're able to go back out on site, do you see this not being a process anymore, or is there an application for kind of these virtual ones?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I totally forgot to even bring that up. But that is a very good point. So no, this doesn't have to be something. So where I've also heard is that some people had piloted this long before this. And what you can do is shift your resources. Let's say you have multiple locations. One location gets hit with a flood, and your services is flood related. You can move some of your folks from another location, not physically, but virtually, into that side, so they can help even out the workload. As well, if you have some really high performing folks, or you yourself are high performing, you can really kind of expand your to underserved areas, right? So, I mean, obviously you won't be doing it across the nation in most cases, but you can really expand on your area and get some good projects based on having these conversations without, again, ever going to site. And, I'm sure anyone who has to travel a lot, if you do one less, that means you have an extra several hours that you can do something else of value instead of driving to site. So in this time where it's an expectation that you won't be visiting, you have the excuse not to do it anyway. But moving forward, this is something that you could add to your tool belt, tool chest of a way to communicate without spending that time. And our tool does enable this by, again, being a very visual tool. And a lot of your clients may not be as savvy in terms of what you provide. So having something that you can physically, touch and change and show how it's related to their own site is a pretty powerful tool. So we're really excited about it. I'd love to hear feedback from anyone else who may be doing this. Again, with the idea that since it's not something that will, if it works out for you, continue to use it. I'd love to understand how we can make the tool better to enable this. Excuse me. So I've actually covered a good chunk of the collaboration pieces. I want to just kind of summarize again that the tool does by nature allow you to do a lot of your work without ever being in the same room as whoever you're working with. I think this does enable in this time, a leg up from folks who are still in paper, still having to do stuff. There are, of course, limitations. You do still need to work with your client as closely as possible. But this tool can help you around the edges to get more done, even from a far distance. So I'm going to stop on that side. I do have a couple other things to cover, but obviously if there's questions about what we've seen thus far, I'm happy to do so. There are a couple, as I mentioned at the beginning, there have been a couple of updates since last month when we did the webinar. That's something we'll be including. We'll be disseminating that information in a number of ways, but since you're here, love to talk about a couple of the things that we've done in the month since we met last time. We'll be doing this on a monthly basis. We did add a couple of pretty cool features. I'm going to show those here in the app. See where I put it. Here we go. What I have here is I drew a box with my draw tool, and I added a shape here in the middle. So even though it looks like a line, that's actually in the center is one of our shapes. So we have this tool that you can use all over the place for a variety of reasons for the fill here. And shapes in the past, you couldn't use them in conjunction with fill because the app didn't know that it was a shape and it just didn't work. So what we've enabled is using using a shape to define a boundary. So let's say that this centerpiece is where I'm going to put a fountain. Everything around here is going to be concrete. I want to indicate that concrete area. So I can pick my fill option. And now we have a new button here that says when I want to use the shape as a fill boundary. So what that means is better seen than described. So I'm just going to tap anywhere in this area that I want to fill, and there I go. And I can use that on this sort of fill as ornamentation and or as a measurement piece too. So you can capture your square footage with the centerpiece dropped out. That's a really nice feature. I can still use it in the other way. So let me get rid of that. So if I have it turned off, it'll work like it used to do, which is to fill the entire area. So may not seem like a lot at the very first, but once you start drilling into it, there's multiple cases. One of those really strong ones, again, is I want to get a subset of this area for measurement purposes, and I can do that simply by doing that. And the other one that I wanted to show, anybody who's used ArcSite for a while knows that when you use a text tool, it provided just a small little area where you could type in. So if you were typing more than, say, 2 lines, you really couldn't even see what you're writing. So over the last 2 releases, we've done some improvement on the text tool, which I just love. So I'm going to show you those. I'm going to go to my text thing here. I'm going to first come down and look at this thing at the bottom where I set my default settings. And you can see here that we also added an alignment, a font. So I can choose a different type of font, and it'll use all the fonts you have on your device. And you can certainly buy other fonts. So if you're looking for, say, like an architectural looking font, that's something that's been requested a lot. Mine doesn't have one by default, but I could go buy one for $10 and then always use that. It's also allowing me to do bold versus non-bold and whatnot. So just establishing those sorts of text options that are commonly available elsewhere, that's been added. But additional to that, when I do it, now I get this big box. So I can start typing a lot and still see, whereas it used to be cut off about right here. So again, doesn't seem like a lot. Since I've been using it, I've just been praising it because it speeds up my process and both typing it in and being able to affect a change, make it look a certain way. So those are the 2 big ones. I made some speed improvements under the covers. It's like when you buy a water heater, there's nothing to show, right? You get a lot of hot water. In this case, you're going to speed up. We've also fixed some bugs. We got a bunch of things in the pipeline. In our next release, will have the ability to take some more stuff. We're working on our DWG. We talked about the CAD workflow where you're sending it out. There are some natively inherently differences of what some of the tools can that take our things, what they'll handle. So we've been working around that. We have, in the next version, we'll be bringing in fills. So let's say if I exported this in the new version, this fill would be brought over into the DWG. We're going to be doing some other work around that as well. In the next version, right now, if you've used our opening tool, it's a really neat tool. You can use it for a variety of different ways, but it also came in at some very odd sizes. I have rarely ever seen a 9-foot residential door. So one of the things we did is tighten that up so they'll be reasonably sized. So when I come in, I don't have to change them to be a reasonable size. They'll just come in sized appropriately. And then if you change it, that will become your new default. We're actively working on a whole lot of fronts, and I will make this last request that anybody who is on the call or is watching this later, we are constantly looking for that feedback on how to make things better. You know, we can add new features, but we can also, like, these two are both improving existing features, and that goes a long way to improving your experience. I'm going to stop talking. I think I've said all the words I can possibly say in a day. 40 minutes, we can gain back 20 or happily answer any and all questions that come from you guys.
Awesome. Well, as we wait to see if there are any questions, obviously appreciate everybody joining us today, and we'll be getting the recording made of this and distributing that out, but also we'll be doing another monthly webinar next month. So be prepared and ready when we announce the topic of that. So we're looking forward to seeing you again in another month. So yeah, I don't have too many questions flowing in just yet, but
I will
give
say
it a couple minutes.
I will say that we're not smart enough to help you with your typing. If you misspell like I did, tough luck. But you can always go back in there and change it. Yeah, I echo what Andrew said. We are completely committed to making this tool as easy to use and as useful to use and as professional as possible. And so this is one way we're reaching out. We're trying to expand our outreach. We will have in the email our direct contact information, so please feel free to reach out and connect.
It looks like we just had a question come in.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for it here.
Sure. Love to. So it's something that we've had for a long time in our tool.
Patrick, real quick, just to be sure, the question was about takeoffs and just talking a little bit more about takeoffs. So
sure, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So always repeat the question. We want to know about takeoffs. So in our world, we started as a drawing tool 6 years ago, 5 years ago. Long time ago, we added the ability to take shapes and convert them. So I'm going to actually open up what I call my products pane and kind of go into a couple of those. I can take either a shape or I can capture a line, so linear footage, linear meter, whatever it is you capturing, an area. All those things I can draw on the screen. And let me make sure I have one that does this. That is not one that does this. Let me find another one. Here we go. So I have some just called smart controls, right? So at the bottom, I'm going to tap and add that into the screen and make it a lot bigger so we can see it easier. The thing I've dropped in is the visual indicator for the diagram. However, I can also tap on my attributes button here to my left. And if I have predefined questions that I want to capture, either capture or automatically add, they can be something that automatically shows up, or as in this case, what I have set up is a series of questions that I can answer whether they be drop downs, open-ended questions, whether we can add photos. So there's a whole series of things that you can collect about an object, whether it's one that you're seeing on site or whether it's one where you're thinking you're going to put in. Either case, I collect this information while I'm on site. I'm going to save that. Obviously, I haven't filled it all in, but you get the idea. You can fill in those questions. Now that I've actually dropped in one, I can copy it, and it's going to copy all those answers that I created. So it kind of speeds up the process. If you're copying one, all the ones that I've answered will already be there. The only difference there is if there's a photo, you don't copy that because you only want to have that photo associated with that original instance of it. But everything else gets copied. So very quickly, either if you have a PDF that you're working from and you want to drop these on top of existing, or you're out on site and you're capturing that in the moment from a PDF or drawing it, however you get the background, the workflow is very simple. You have these products, you drop them on screen. Here's one where, you know, it might be a cable run or something. And let's see if I have in this thing, not sure I do. Here's an area one. So I could drop in an area. And by doing just those three things, I can, again, come over to my attributes. In this case, I don't think I do have a couple of them. So size here is 6. This is a gutter one. Build that up, and then I can come up here and look, and I will have this list of items that I've collected. And I did answer those questions on the screen when I was looking at it, but I could also wait and mass edit those entries here on this screen as well. So however you drop it in, you can capture the data then, or come here and make bulk changes. So I can, again, do that. Once I've got everything collected, then I just upload it to the cloud. Just like I talked about earlier, any of those sorts of interactions with other folks, whatever, they can grab it. And at that point, this is how you're viewing it in the app, but at that point it can be in a PDF, so it's non-editable, or it could be in an Excel, so it is an editable thing. Does that give you a high level? I'm happy to drill more into it, either here or in a separate session. It is a pretty sweet little tool we have here. And in this case, it's very agnostic, and it doesn't matter what kind of data you're collecting. You can collect anything and as many questions or as little questions as you want. So I asked a question and immediately started talking. So I'm gonna shut up and see if that suffices or not. Okay, the next question is, what about estimating? So I'll kind of extend this conversation out because it's very similar. And we have folks who are doing both at the same time. They're not necessarily separated. You can do very similar process. So in this case, some of the things I've collected here already are priced. So in the case of this micro mesh, I've already predetermined before coming out on site that there's a cost associated with this. And just by drawing it on the screen, I'm capturing that amount. So if I come back here, I have a whole lot more of these that as I drop on the screen, I get a pricing on that as well. And that's the simple just drop in or draw. You can get a lot more complex in your pricing. This is I drop in, I get a certain price, or I do a linear footage at a certain cost. You can do a whole lot more with the costing side of things. But at a root level, it's a very simple process. You set it up, then you just draw a picture. And based on the picture, you can get your takeoff schedule and your estimate and your visual. And provide those. And we have different outputs, right? So if you're sending a proposal estimate, you can do it directly from our app. And if you're in that kind of workflow, it's going to go out in an estimate form versus, your takeoff obviously is an internal thing that you can use and just have Excel and can hand that off to operations. Again, that kind of scratches the surface, kind of gives you a flavor. There's a lot more to it. But at a root level, what we like about it is, and it seems like our clients it's a very simple process to do. Basically, anybody can set it up, and then anybody in the field can use it. Yep. And like I said, we'll send our information if you want to drill in any farther. We can certainly turn it on for you to see if it's something that works for you. Or you might already be at a level where you have that availability. I'll check and see where you are, and we can take it from there. Awesome. Well, and I do appreciate the questions and the time. If you don't have any more questions, I'm not seeing anything else coming in right now. We could all use a little extra time in our lives. We can cut this short and pick it up next month or by email after the fact. So again, everybody, thank you. Have a great day or night or wherever you are, and we'll call it a meeting right now.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Andrew.